Eastern on the last Thursday of the month here. And so welcome. Just wait for confirmation from you guys in the chat that you can see me, that you can hear me, and we'll get this party started. Yeah, good to see everybody. These are meant to be like really super interactive. And so if you have questions as we're like going through the material, that's what we're here for. So I do these live streams every week basically as a way to kind of slow down. Cool. Angelina saying she can see me. So awesome. Yeah. So we'll jump right into it, and then I'll be asking you guys questions, or if things make sense as we go through. But if you have a question about Stretch in particular, would love to. Justin Nor 8133. All good, Brad. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I need to say this more often. None of this information is meant to be taken as financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. As always, do your own research. You should never take financial advice from a dude sitting in his office talking to a camera. Right? Okay. So with that out of the way, I wanted to talk today about Stretch. So this the presentation that I'm sort of riffing off is from yesterday's video. So if you want a more succinct, kind of presentation of this information, I would suggest that you go watch that video. It hasn't even been out 24 hours yet. But in that video, I'm talking about strategies. Stretch preferred share pays 11.5 monthly dividends, but most Bitcoiners get this wrong, that it's not for everyone. And using it at the wrong time, even if it is for you, could derail your 10-year financial independence lines, trajectory, essentially. So in today's session, I'm going to break down exactly how Stretch works, what the real risks are that you need to know, and whether it really fits your income generation. So that's really the important piece. Is we'll talk about the investment phase that you're in. So by the end, you'll know, okay, if Stretch is right for your portfolio, and if not now, when it might be right for your portfolio, and then how it compares to self-custody Bitcoin. I mean, obviously they serve two different purposes, so we'll talk about that as well, and the exact position sizing that makes sense for your particular financial independence journey. So let's start by talking about the income generation phase reality. Okay, so you want to understand which phase of your financial journey you're actually in before you start choosing income generating products like Stretch. So if you are in the income generation phase, and we'll define the terms of that a little bit, more specifically here in a second. But if you're in the capital appreciation phase and you're investing in things like BTCI, which we talk about a lot, or Stretch, you're actually capping the upside of your investments. So there's a time and a place for these. And so by the end of this, I want you to have a really clear idea of how this works, when it might be, if it's a good fit for where it is at you, because there's some other use cases for Stretch as well. So most Bitcoin holders think that all Bitcoin exposure should be self-custodied for maximum appreciation. So that's one extreme end. But there are also two distinct phases. There's, like I said, there's capital growth and income generation. So I would say that, as I've, sort of relaunched this platform, I've been interacting with you guys one-to-one, those of you guys that book 30-minute calls, which, by the way, there's a link in the video description below. If you are, looking for more guidance, or you have a situation that you want to talk through, you can book a 30-minute call. And so the vast majority, even of my high net worth clients, are not ready for the income generation phase. They're still in the capital growth phase. So they're focusing on increasing net worth, growing their overall nest egg. Obviously, they're buying Bitcoin, they're buying other assets as well. They're harnessing that compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of Bitcoin. And then once you reach your financial independence number, your FIRE number, as they say, and that could be 500,000, it could be $1 million, it could be 5 million, whatever that number is, then you can take a look at your asset pile and say, okay, cool. Now I can start flipping some of these assets to generate income for me. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. But essentially, when you cross the Rubicon into FIRE, you're focusing on generating income while preserving and even growing your net worth. And you're using Bitcoin, in this case, as the nuclear reactor to generate that income. So if you use Stretch during the accumulation period, though, during the capital growth phase, you are capping your upside, like I said a few minutes ago, at 11.5% instead of the unlimited Bitcoin appreciation. So if you stay in pure accumulation during the income phase, then you're probably still trading time for money when you could be living off your assets. Hey, Joshua Tenefrancia, appreciate your research, Brad. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's awesome. That's the first super that I've ever gotten. So thanks for that. You can't always. Stealth Wealth Strategist says Bitcoin reminds you can't always get what you want. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And then Justin Orr says, also a native Atlantan here, used to live in Woodstock. Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Love Woodstock. Very, very cool town. So the phase framework just kind of covered this, but this is just to kind of cement this concept in your mind. Capital growth phase is where, like for my wife and me, 90% of the Bitcoin that we own is in self-custody. We're still dollar cost averaging for maximum upside, and then as we're sort of dipping our toe into the income generation phase, we're using stretch, cover to call ETFs like BTCI. And then we're also talking a lot about safely utilizing Bitcoin backed loans. The key decision is that you need a significant Bitcoin stack before stretch makes sense if you're trying to use it in the income generation phase. You're going to have a significant amount of Bitcoin or basically assets in order for you to be able to purchase enough stretch to derive an income off of that. But here's the thing, stretch isn't just Bitcoin with yield. It has a completely different risk profile that could hurt you if you don't understand it. So I cover these strategies in much more depth in my micro newsletter, which I release. It's 3 sentences about 3 times a week, and it's aimed at my core profile, which are millennials and Gen X that are trying to incorporate Bitcoin more deeply into their personal finances so they can get to financial independence in 10 years or less. It's all actionable content, zero fluff. Type micro in the comments if you want access to that, and I'll throw that. I'll actually throw that in there. Essentially, the 3 sentences. The first sentence is something of mine. The second sentence is usually an affiliate or a channel sponsor, and then the third one is a piece of just general wisdom that I've sort of found out there that I want to share with you guys. It's not all it's not all my pimping, I guess, of my own content in there. So it's truly meant to give you some bite-sized stuff that you can choose to chew on or not chew on. Let's see. All right. So next we're going to talk about, okay, how does stretch work? Like what actually happens when you're buying stretch? Okay. Seems like, all right. Understanding the mechanics prevents panic when stretch dips below $100. So a lot of you guys already know that stretch is designed to maintain $100 par level. And so you need to know the safety mechanisms before investing. So when stretch trades below $99, stretch increases the dividend rate by 25 to 50 basis points to attract more buyers. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking the stretch shares of stock that we're buying, and they're going and buying more Bitcoin, which, the more you study this, the more I study this, the more I'm like, man, this is a really brilliant strategy on Michael Saylor's part, because I know that he's been, a bullish Bitcoin maximalist since 2020, I think, ish. Maybe sooner than that. I think it was sooner than that. But he's done the orange pilling thing on a hyperscale, and what he's realized is that, okay, there are so many people that are not going to get this. They're just not going to get this. And I see Joshua. Let me type the. Yeah. All right. So I'll give you the link to the. It's got too many characters in it. Just make sure when you subscribe, hold on a second here, that you check your spam folder and then confirm that you want to subscribe. Otherwise, you won't get any of the emails, and I wind up having to unfortunately delete a lot of people from the list that never confirm, because it's a delivery thing. It's basically. One of the reasons I do that is to keep my emails out of the spam filter. So, but what Michael Saylor was, what he has done with this is he's saying, okay, I don't know and this is my projection into his imagination, but he's like, okay, a lot of people are just not going to get this. Let me just give them what they want. Let me give them Bitcoin exposure at a 10, 11.5, whatever interest per month. Will absorb all of the volatility. So we're giving them Bitcoin exposure without the volatility. And so what they've been able to do is create a product that's like 6, 7, 8 or more % above what you're going to get out of a money market. So I think this is going to be a really, really huge, product moving forward. So the stretch safety mechanisms, dividend adjustments, the rate changes monthly to maintain that $100 par price. They have an ATM program. New shares are issued at $100 when the demand exists. They have the redemption option. The company can redeem at $101, which creates a ceiling for the price growth. And then USD Reserve, they have 28 months of dividend payments in reserve, and it's perpetual. There's no maturity date. This is not debt, and the company can't default. So, I would definitely, again, do your own research with all of this stuff, but the more I look into Stretch, the more I'm just like, wow, this is a really amazing instrument in a lot of different ways. So now you understand the mechanics, but what happens when Bitcoin crashes? This is always the case. And that's where the real risks emerge. And so along the lines of getting more Bitcoin or Stretch, you can do this with this next company that I'm going to talk about. I want to take a quick moment and introduce you guys. The sponsor of today's live session is Horizon. And what they do is they help you take your fiat trapped home equity and buy more Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin, you can buy, whatever asset, but most people use it to buy more Bitcoin. You can use it to buy Stretch as well. There are no monthly payments, no interest charges, no fixed term limit, no forced selling, no margin calls, and you get to custody Bitcoin however you want. So if you want to hold it in self-custody or collaborative self-custody, or if you want to buy Stretch with it, you have the ability to do that. So there's a link in the video description below. Just visit their site, and there's a really cool, easy little calculator that you can go through, and I would recommend setting up a call with those guys if that's something that sounds palatable to you. So the 4 critical risks that we're going to talk about, most people see that 11.5% yield and ignore the risk. They get, dollar signs in their eyes or Satoshis in their eyes. You need to understand all 4 risks before committing capital. Stretch has 4 distinct risks that could impact your financial independence timeline if you're not prepared to countenance them when they come. And these aren't theoretical. They've already happened multiple times. Stretch has already dumped 6% in August of 2025 last year, 11% in November, and 7% in February of 2026. These drawdowns happen precisely when Bitcoin is crashing, and that's when you're most vulnerable. So the 4 risks are, risk number 1 is the asymmetric downside. The upside is capped at 11.5%. So like I said, if you're still in the capital appreciation profile or part of your financial independence journey, you're capping your upside at 11.5%. And the downside can be 5 to 10% in days. Risk number 2 is the Bitcoin correlation. Stretch dumps when Bitcoin dumps. So it's not a true diversifier. So if you're looking to diversify, outside of Bitcoin correlated assets, this is something to be aware of. Extended discounts can trade below $100 for weeks or months. 15+% is possible. And risk number 4 is a prolonged bear market. And the worst case is 2+ years of Bitcoin weakness, and that could stress the structure of that. So I personally think that, a big part of what we're using Stretch and BTCI for in our portfolio, as we're just dipping our toe into this part of the income generation strategy, is really to generate income no matter if the price of Bitcoin is going up or the price of Bitcoin is going down. The traditional Bitcoiner, podcast talking point is buy and hold, buy the dip, and I think that there's a lot of room in Bitcoin personal finance for you to have a little bit of diversification, whether that's, 90, 80, 90% of your Bitcoin is in, cold self-storage, cold storage. And then maybe like you're like my wife and me, we've got, a good percentage of our assets that are still trapped in IRAs or Roth IRAs because we can't utilize those yet. And so that might be a good, way to start to kind of dip the toe into using these assets. So stretch is pretty safe in my humble opinion. I've been studying it for about 6 months now, but it doesn't mean that it's right for your portfolio. Where does it actually fit into a 10-year financial independence strategy? By the way, if you guys are getting value out of this, I would love it if you smashed the like button, maybe subscribe to the channel. It does help this. It pushes the algorithm to put it out to more people, and it's illegal to not do this in like 21 states. So, and also like if you're still, scratching your head about how all of this works, how stretch works or how it could work into your portfolio, where you are along your financial independence journey, what you should do next, or you just want a second set of eyes on your situation, I do offer 30-minute calls. The link is in the video description below. They're very reasonably priced. And I'm looking at collecting testimonials because I've done, since December, I've done probably somewhere between 50 and 60 of those, the people that have reached out. And it's just 30 minutes that really is going to help give you some clarity on where you are and what you should do next. And then obviously you're showing up to this live stream. We do this every week, 11 a.m. Eastern. We talk through all of these strategies. We talk through, self-custody, Dave Ramsey style personal finance, FIRE style personal finance, the buy, borrow, die strategy. So next we're going to talk about the position sizing framework, because once you've recognized, okay, cool, I have a pretty good idea that stretch is right for me, or it's going to be right for me soon. Okay, now how do I make sure that I'm sizing the size of the position in a correct way? So position sizing determines whether stretch accelerates or derails your financial timeline. Too much exposure creates unacceptable risk. Stretch should be a satellite holding, not a core position. The question is, what percentage of your portfolio makes sense? Many people, and I see this all the time, I see this with a lot of you guys that are scheduling these 30-minute calls, and we'll talk about how to avoid doing this by making sure you've got all your 4 levels of liquidity in place. But I see people going all in on Bitcoin, or going all in on stretch or BTCI or whatever it is, and not leaving themselves enough liquidity, and it always creates a super dangerous situation. So many people go in on high yield products without understanding the correlation risk. When Bitcoin crashes 40%, your stable income allocation crashes too. Now you still do get an income off of it, but you just want to keep your eye on that and make sure that you understand it. So this is a position sizing framework. I'm not going to go through each one of these. You can do a screenshot of this, or just rewatch this video. But this is a really good, kind of way to sort of think about it. It's not the be all end all. I do get a lot of questions about allocation and percentages and stuff like that when people leave comments, and it's really difficult, because one of the things that I need to know from, sort of a coaching perspective is I need to know a few data points about your situation. I need to know, these are questions that I send out in a questionnaire form when somebody books a call. It's like, okay, what does this call, what needs to happen in this call for it to be a home run? What's your monthly income before taxes? What are your monthly expenses? What's your financial independence retire early number? Like, what's the nest egg you're trying to build? And then there's one more I can't remember off the top of my head, but I need to have at least a few data points of context to be able to say, okay, cool, this is where you are. You're clearly still in capital growth, or hey, it sounds like I'm getting ready to talk to a guy this afternoon. He's shared those data points. I can tell that, he and his wife are ready to jump into the income generation phase. And so I'm sure a lot of the conversation will be around, okay, how do I do my position sizing? Which assets should I put in? So that's a whole other type of conversation. The key rule is to never allocate more than you can afford to see drop 10% without panic selling. And the way that you do that is this 4 levels of liquidity that I talk about all the time. I've got a video dedicated to that. It's a concept that I got from Mark Moss, and I've just been using it like, wildfire ever since. So now you have the framework, but knowing the framework isn't enough. You need to know your numbers granularly to execute properly. This is another thing that I see as I'm having these one-to-one conversations with you guys. A lot of people don't know their numbers granularly. They may have a vague idea of what their income is, what their asset, inventory is, and then, especially most people don't know what they're spending at a granular level. And so for that, I have a free budgeting course that I produced a few years ago, and I used to charge $250 for it. But the link is in the description. I make it available for free to the public. And you'll walk away, whether you watch the whole thing or take the whole thing or watch it on 2X, whatever, you'll walk away with a few ideas to get you more granular about organizing your finances, cash flow planning, all of that stuff, so that you know your numbers granularly. Because especially when you're moving into this financial independence sort of posture, one of the key elements of that is knowing what your expenses are so that you can work on your savings rate. That's a huge part of the financial independence, retire early, sort of conversation. So that's the stretch reality. You've moved from wondering, is this too good to be true, to understanding at least, a little bit of the mechanics and the position sizing. So it's not theory. I've analyzed the structure, for the past 6 months, and I'm confident that it's fundamentally different from products like algorithmic stablecoins, which I think is another just brilliant piece of what Michael Saylor has done. But knowing the framework isn't enough. You need to evaluate your current position and make some decisions. This is exactly what I cover in my buy, borrow, die guide. It's a whole video that I did about this not too long ago. So I wanted to cover that. I also wanted to cover just kind of take a couple of minutes and talk about these two phases of investing, and because I think that this is, one of the. I was thinking about this morning when I was out for a walk, and I was, conversing with myself. I'm sure, a lot of my neighbors are like, dude, this guy talks to him. He walks around the neighborhood talking to himself. And I do. So I think one of the biggest, there's this huge there's this gaping hole in the personal finance space. And Christopher Nelson, who has a channel called Managing Tech Millions, who talks about the micro family office. I totally recommend that if your net worth is anywhere between 1 million and 30 million, and I have, a broad range of clients that are, all over the place within that range, it's a really good idea to start watching his content as well. Because what happens is, okay, let's say you're like, okay, you've been in the growth phase. This is pretty much what your portfolio looks like when you're in the growth phase. You've got maybe 5% in preservation. Maybe that's in bonds or gold and silver, but everything else is growth, right? So you've got on-chain Bitcoin, maybe you've got IBIT, FBTC, maybe some other assets as well. And so you're just all about growth, 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 growth. Then once you have determined that you are ready to either retire, I would say that the vast majority, I'm making generalizations here, but a lot of the people that I'm talking to are like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to retire. I just don't want to do what I've been doing. I've been in corporate America, or have a business that I want to sell, but I do want to turn my asset pile into a nuclear reactor to start generating some income. That's when you have to sit down and start the conversation around, okay, I have to have an inventory of what I currently have. Okay, and then what do I need to shift into asset-wise? That's dividend stocks, could be Stretch, could be BTCI, could be, assets like that, could be a Bitcoin-backed loan. What, amount of my asset, percentage, and this is an extreme, example where almost half is bifurcated between growth and income, but that percentage is going to be very personal. It's going to be depending on your asset pile and then how much income that you need. And so that's when you start to recognize, like, okay, cool, I need to really start studying this. That's why I say, even if you're in the income growth phase, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking out, $1,000 or $5,000, depending on your assets and your income, and dipping the toe into Stretch, dipping the toe into BTCI, dipping the toe into a Bitcoin-backed loan, very safely, I would say, so that you are building a vocabulary of how these assets work. You're putting them on, you're sort of feeling them out. So my wife and I, we have BTCI. Joshua, where can I find this? Where can I find his content? Yeah, just go to Managing Tech Millions. That's his YouTube channel. His name's Christopher Nelson. He's great. I've attended his webinar as well. Actually, I would love to partner with him. I think we have, we share an audience. He doesn't really talk about Bitcoin. I don't know what his stance on Bitcoin is, but I think the concept of, just studying this process and understanding this is really, is really, really good. So this is just an important, part, because once you flip into your fire phase, you're looking at dividend yielding assets. You're looking at Bitcoin-backed loans, like I was talking about. And again, percentage of your portfolio that goes into generating that income is going to be very individual based on your asset pile and based on the income that you need. And so those are the kinds of things that we talk about in these 30-minute calls and other types of, coaching programs that I offer. This is the most important thing that I am trying to reiterate with my audience and with my private clients right now are this concept of 4 levels of liquidity that every investor needs, because I've seen so many times, especially in this cycle that we're in, that a lot of people are over allocated into Bitcoin, which is a controversial thing to say as a Bitcoiner, as a hardcore Bitcoin maxi. How could I be over allocated into Bitcoin? Well, it's possible. It's possible that you're over allocated when the price dumps, you don't have any cash to cover your expenses or to cover an emergency, and you wind up having to sell Bitcoin. If the goal is to not sell your Bitcoin and to just accumulate your asset pile, which I know that for the vast majority of you guys, it is. And the key concept with this is a quote from Napoleon. I think this sums it up really well. A military genius is a man who can do the average thing when everyone else is losing his mind. And if you pay attention to the markets, if you pay attention to what retail investors are doing, which most retail investors, in my experience and opinion, are gamblers. They have very much a gambler attitude. So I don't know. So let me see. I don't know what that Web3, that's probably spam. So you're peacing out on that one. I don't tolerate any kind of like spam. I don't tolerate any kind of profanity or denigrating, ad hominem attacks on me or anyone else in the comments. So, this is a place where we talk, we are, just very respectful. We practice intellectual hospitality. So anyway, didn't mean to get sidetracked by that. But level 1 is, okay, so we're going to talk about the 4 levels of liquidity now. Level 1 is your operating capital. So this is your safety net. This is your emergency fund. This is cash for immediate everyday needs. The components of this are, rent, mortgage, groceries, utilities, insurance, and this is very much where appreciate you too, Joshua. This is where I'm very much a Dave Ramsey guy. Okay, so those of you guys that may be new may not know that I paid off $174,000 worth of consumer and mortgage debt in 2.5 years following Dave's program, right? So this is, near and dear to my heart. And this is something that I see, when people don't have 6 to 12 months of living costs in a savings account, this is when they run into trouble. And this is when they have to sell assets and take a tax hit and then take, a ding on not having those assets to appreciate in the future. Now, a lot of Bitcoiners are going to say, oh, but what cash sucks and it's a melting ice cube. And I get it. It is. So I would say a percentage of this could be, obviously you want to keep in cash, but you could also do a percentage of this in cash equivalents. So cash equivalents Stretch would be one of these. Cash equivalents could be anything that you can turn into cash inside of 7 days. So that could be money markets, short-term treasury bills, certain ETFs, preferred stocks like Stretch. So you've got instant liquidity, you've got low risk. The strategy here is to keep enough to cover unexpected expenses or a temporary income gap. Now, level 3 is where you get into assets that you can actually borrow against. And so this could be your Bitcoin stack. And Stealth Wealth Strategist, I put the micro, let me do that again for you. I put that in the comments earlier, so I'll put that in there for you so you can subscribe. Yeah, just make sure when you subscribe to check your spam folder and make sure that you confirm. Otherwise, you won't get the emails. Like I said, it's just a way to set it up that the deliverability of the emails is as high as possible. So the components of this could be, a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance. The Horizon product that I mentioned earlier, the sponsor of the channel right now, This is something that they offer is, home equity to buy more Bitcoin. Could be a stock portfolio. A lot of people don't know that you can take out a margin loan against your investments in certain buckets or in certain types of accounts. And then obviously Bitcoin, non-custodial loans against your Bitcoin. And I definitely would recommend, one where you keep your keys. So the strategy is to use these for planned needs, not panic situations, and you always want to have a repayment plan. Now, I've got a whole slew of content that I've done about how to repay your loans, how to safely borrow against Bitcoin. Like, I have a very conservative criteria for that, which I do get criticized by some people in my audience as well, that I'm like hyper paranoid. But I'm coming from a place that, I've seen so many people wreck their finances by not having a proper investor mindset. It's just really, really, it can be very, very dangerous if you don't do it the right way. So, and then non-liquid assets is level 4. So this is assets that are difficult to liquidate quickly without significant loss. So this is real estate, your primary home, rental properties, land, maybe life insurance policy, like cash value policies. It could be your business, private equity, or ownership stakes. So the strategy is to treat these as long-term holdings and only borrow against them in extreme, carefully planned situations. So I know that, where we are, I talk about this all the time too, like, a lot of you guys in my audience have been in Bitcoin for less than 5 years. I would say a lot, even more, probably the bigger number is less than 2 years. So I always like to bring up where we are in the on the technology adoption curve. So I would say the first 15 years of Bitcoin were innovators, early adopters, people that are like, okay, I'm willing to get outside my comfort zone. I'm willing to learn some new software, willing to incorporate some hardware into my setup. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to take advantage of this awesome, amazing technology, decentralized internet of money. Where we are now is we're in the early majority phase of the Bitcoin adoption phase. And this is full of people that don't care about self-custody. They really want, and this is not me being judgmental. This is just meant to be, sort of a, kind of a definition of the early majority always cares less about what the innovators and the early adopters care about. So one of the things that I'm trying to do with my content is I'm trying to speak to everyone, obviously, but the early majority people that are new to Bitcoin, it's like, hey, look, I'm a Bitcoin maxi. I'm a huge fan of this technology, of this asset class. And if you own Bitcoin and IBIT or FBTC or any of these, you are a Bitcoiner. My encouragement is to also, start looking at self-custody. So I just wanted to say, a couple of things about that because self-custody is really, really important. It doesn't have to be your entire stack. In fact, maybe it shouldn't be your entire stack. However, it's super, super important. So let me, what questions do you guys have? I saw a couple of comments about, let's see, I'm all in on stretch. Be careful about all in. I would only say, yeah, Joshua Tenefrancia, appreciate you too. Thank you, sir, very much. Another thing I wanted to talk about real quick is I just released this free guide. And there's a link in the video description below. I got enough questions about the buy, borrow, die strategy, which I would say that the buy, borrow, die strategy really fits into the income generation stage. So I put together this PDF that really outlines, okay, what is it, going through, your determining your investment stage, determining that, my reference is really, my preference and my recommendation is that you should never borrow against more than 10% of your overall Bitcoin stack because you are risking it. So there's a lot of conversation around that. Some people think that I'm a little bit, overly conservative with that. That's totally fine. My interest is helping you, win with all of this stuff without wrecking yourself. So I have what's called a 10% rule. And then we get into like understanding the loan to value and the guidelines around that and how to monitor your loans. And I talk about the 4 levels of liquidity. And then I also cover, how the 3 payoff methods, and then some, just some common mistakes to avoid. So if you're interested in that, just type BBD in the comments, and I'll leave that I'll leave a link to that as well. I'll actually go ahead and put it in there now. Let's see. And you can download that and just have that as your, maybe it's not relevant to you right now, but at some point in the future, it probably will be. But that'll give you sort of like a really quick sort of baseline education around all of that. This is a really great article that I'll put in the chat as well by Crypto Narratives. And this is called Understanding Stretch, How Strategy Turns Yield Demand into Bitcoin Buying. Like this is really... This resource, I forget, I think somebody sent it to me. Like, you guys send me great stuff all the time. And Jennifer Marks, Drummer Girl, the Buy, Borrow, Die link is right above your comment. So if you just click on that and just put in your email address, I'll send that to you. But this is a great article. I'll go ahead and put this, like I said, I'll put this in the chat as well. This is STRC article. Because I think that it's, a big part of this whole process really is just understanding, okay, where am I in the process? I'm in the growth phase. Okay, I'm looking at moving into the income generation phase. Okay, maybe my strategy is I just need to keep buying Bitcoin. I just need to keep stacking assets and get a clear definition of what financial independence looks like what is the number that I'm trying to get to. My pleasure, Jennifer. Thank you. So this, I think, will really be a great tool for you to expand your understanding of how all of that works. Another thing, this is just a little bit more fun. I've been really diving into one of the things that most of us, if we're honest, are always curious about. Sort of where we stand, where we stack up. Now I know that most of you guys in my audience are millennials and Gen X, and you're really serious about investing. You're really serious about trying to get financial independence. You're really serious about stacking as much Bitcoin and then using that Bitcoin to actually live your life, So this George Kamel, he's got a great channel. He's one of the Dave Ramsey guys, and he does these man on the street interviews. And so there were a couple of these that I just wanted to, kind of, there's another video, but it's by a different creator. But just to kind of give you in financial independence, retire early terms, his savings rate. So he's saving and investing 45% of his income. Like that's, if you can get to 50%, like I've talked about this a lot on the channel. Like the last 5 years of our journey to financial independence, I had some really great great from an income standpoint, corporate sales jobs. I was in SaaS, enterprise SaaS sales. And, so my wife and I, we really constrained our lifestyle and our expenses and our spending to raise our savings rate we were able to save 70 to 80% of our income during those years. But I would say, so I'll mention that people are like, oh, that's totally unrealistic. I'm not going to be able to do that. You're insane. Well, yeah, you're probably right. But if you can get as close to 50 as possible, man, it just shrinks the distance between where you are now and financial independence. And that's regardless, it doesn't matter. If you want to retire, that's great. If you want a next endeavor, so there's FIRE and then there's FIND, financial independence next endeavor. I would say the vast majority of my audience and my private clients are really looking for another endeavor. They're not necessarily looking to, kick their feet up on the beach and, drink pina coladas or whatever. Really cool. This is another one that I found that I was watching this morning that's like, by Graham Stefan, and it's really interesting because he's having a conversation with this Lamborghini salesman, and the insights are, I'll just let it speak for itself and we can kind of talk about it.
So how many people walk into the Lamborghini dealership pretending to be rich, pretending to be a buyer? And what are the tells?
Yes, absolutely. People come in with their fake watches and, overly designer clothes, and that they're trying to pretend that they can buy something and they can't. They're just trying to get a test drive or something like that. And I can relate to that because I did that many times as a high schooler, trying to go out and test drive interesting cars with some success. But you can't let those people waste your time when you actually have a job to do. And it really doesn't take long in the way that you should sell a car to ask the right questions that they would just not have even thought about, like how they're actually going to use the car, how it relates to other goals that they have, why they want it, and what they believe it is versus what you have to explain it actually is, and things like that. And so if they're just itching to get in the car immediately, let's go, then they weren't going to buy it anyway. But if you can actually have a conversation with someone and they've got a reasonable approach to the idea of purchasing this car, in most cases you can end up with knowing really, really quickly how hard it's going to be for them to do so. Now the ones that are stretching are the best kinds of customers. The ones that can easily write the check are the hardest to motivate to actually do so. But some somebody who knows, like, look, I may be hard to get financed because of this, and this, and they're very forthcoming about that, then those times, you do stand a really, really good chance of getting this person into a car because you probably have more financing resources at your disposal than they may know about or things like that. And so it's really just about asking a lot of questions and making sure that you're framing them in a very positive way and where their answers will become the reasons that they should want to purchase the car.
How often is it that someone comes in and they're just making a terrible financial decision that this person can technically qualify, but it's not smart whatsoever? Is that common? And has there ever been a situation where you've just said, hey, man, we could get you this car, but you probably shouldn't do this?
Well, as you first framed that question, I was going to say, well, in 2013, we got a McLaren franchise. And so that early in McLaren's current existence, they were miserably unreliable cars. And so they would all break, always. The failure rate of these cars in the first week of ownership, where they may have come back in on a tow truck or at least had some very meaningful fault, was 100%. And so when you would sell them, in most cases, they were pretty profitable deals because there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for the car. So you made good money, but you knew this was going to become a problem, always. And so in that regard, there were times when people buying cars that you knew were...
Isn't this interesting? I just thought this was a really cool, insightful, it's like this guy sells these supercars for a living, and so he sees all the fakery and the brokenness that walks through the window, sort of dressed up as rich people, and so I think that's another thing, and I don't have my copy of it here, but if you've never read the book The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley, that is really, really that I read that book the first time back in the 90s. And I've reread it several times, and I reference it all the time. But it really helped me, and I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're a fan of my content and sort of how I'm thinking about things, you kind of get this already. So this is really just kind of affirmation, I guess. But the average millionaire, one of the things that he sort of uncovers in that book is that the average concept of a millionaire by the American middle class is not at all what they actually look like. Typically, they're not driving a Lamborghini. They're not even driving a Mercedes or a BMW or a Lexus. They're driving a Corolla or a Civic or, a used pickup truck or whatever they've got. They live in a modest neighborhood, a modest middle-class neighborhood. Maybe they have, closest to maybe the nicest house in that neighborhood. But they're not wearing a Rolex. They're not wearing Polo. They're not, all of the concepts that most of the American middle class has. The people that Dave Ramsey is talking to is they're not that. So this is just I think this is a really cool little piece of insight.
Troublesome, and you would at least try to help them to understand that. I know that you love Lotuses, but the best way to sell someone on a lease is to try to talk them out of it. And you'll tell them, hey, they're not super comfortable and they're not easy to get into, especially if you are parked next to somebody oh yeah, I love that, it's a nice car. It's just remove everything, and then they're not that expensive in terms of parts, but they do go through tires and brakes really fast. Oh yeah, for handling, that's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna do it myself and I'm stuff. And it is a Honda motor, but you want to make sure that it's maintainable, or Toyota and stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, that's so cool. It's gonna be more reliable. It's gonna go 100,000 miles. I'm gonna drive it all the time. But if you hurt the clamshell, it's really expensive. So just make sure that you've got good insurance and just be careful. Don't bump into stuff. Oh yeah, I love that. It's so light. And they're just talking themselves into it over and over and over again, and it's they always buy them. No one can go look at a Lotus and not buy it. Unless it breaks while they're driving it or catches on fire, which happens. But in terms of a financial decision where somebody is really in a rough spot, again, most of the time those people are stretching so hard to be able to buy these cars, and they know. And they're all well aware, I can't sell this car because I have so much negative equity that I'm rolling from the next one. I had this guy, nicest guy in the world, just had kind of a normal job, made low six figures, and had owned an Aston Martin DB9 for a really long time. And we did a lot of really long-term car financing, these 12-year, 15-year loans. And, if the car doesn't go down in value, that can be a great way to own it.
So I'm curious, in the comments below, I just really am dying to know this. How many of you guys aspire to buy a supercar? How many of you guys are hey, Bitcoin, win Lambo? Type yes if you are aspiring to buy a supercar. Type no if you're not. I'm just really curious about those of you guys that are here today, because I have a gut feeling about that. And then SD Burr, I need more clarity of the risks of stretch. You said yesterday it was Bitcoin. You said it was Bitcoin going down, but has gone down 50%, and stretch went down shortly, but was back to par in a very short time. Yeah, so my first question, SD Burr, would be, are you in the capital growth phase or are you in the income generation phase? Because that's really going to, Angelina says, no, I would imagine probably most of you guys are saying that. So first of all, I would just question, okay, which phase of your investment journey are you on? because that's really going to, help the, help me understand like how pressing this is to you. Because if you're still in the capital growth phase, I would say go read that article that I just posted. Go study that article, watch my videos. You really need to understand stretch better. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to go into all of the risks and all of that stuff in this kind of format, right? Or if you want to book a 30-minute call, like we can talk about it, we could talk about it for 30 minutes for sure. Another thing that I'm going to be doing pretty soon, and if you guys are interested in this, I would love to know. I know a lot of my private clients are. I'm getting ready to start a private community where we meet once a month. I do like a skill builder session membership. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. That would be a way, some clients don't want one-to-one financial coaching, but they want access to a community and to me to kind of answer some of these ongoing questions. And also, SD Burr, I will also be doing more content around stretch, and your questions are very helpful for me to like know what to address next. So I'll be going more into depth on that. Jennifer says, I already have mine, a 2010 Camaro. Nice. Yeah. Hey, that's a 2010 Camaro that is paid for is better than any Lamborghini on the planet, in my opinion. I just look at, and he talks about later in this video, like what the carry costs. And that's a phrase that I got from Thomas Stanley in that book, The Millionaire Next Door. It's like truly wealthy people are always, now maybe you can afford a Lambo. It's not a big deal. You can just stroke a check, you're done with it. But it's interesting to hear him talk about the people that are really stretching to be able to, to afford one of these. And it's not a judgment call. If you want a Lambo, that's totally cool. But I just think it's a very interesting thought exercise because you're buying the car, which is a huge ticket item, but the carry costs, the maintenance and all of those things are two things. $52,000 says no desire, rather have something that appreciates in value or generates income. All right, amen. I'm right there with you. SD Burr in between, but I can see use case for a chunk of my capital to start to create some stable income to accelerate debt payoff while preserving capital. Yeah, if you're still trying to, pay off consumer debt, definitely go through my budgeting course because that's really where I would say I'm very extreme when it comes to consumer debt. You want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So my budgeting course will show you exactly how to do that. I would say that since you're sort of in between, I would say that you're a lot like my wife and me. There's no harm. There's no harm in buying a share of Stretch just as an experiment. Because if you have a share or 5 shares or 10 shares or 100 shares, you've got some skin in the game and you're going to start watching it and you're going to start studying it more. But it's not, I think that's another thing that I'm constantly encouraging clients is like, don't go all in on anything. It's okay. If you've got your bases covered, which I would say, if you still have consumer debt, you got to get rid of that. You got to get your 4 levels of liquidity. That's sort of the next thing. And then really just do an inventory of what your assets are, what's your financial independence number, and really move through this process with slowness and diligence around it. Angelina Long says, I'd rather travel and be free from stuff. Amen. Dream Thread says, I sold my car 2 years ago and have been cycling everywhere. That's amazing. Oh, I would love to. Dream Thread, do you live in Europe? I lived in Germany for a couple of years, 2 of the best years of my life. And one of the things that I love about Europe is like literally you could ride a bike everywhere. You could ride a bike to get anywhere in Europe. Everything's just, connected that way, which is really cool. In some places, I know where we live, it's, if you ride out on the major roads, you're taking your life into your own hands. Buck 52,000 says, I like your channel because you are a recovering Bitcoin maxi like me. Yeah, I think that's a great conversation point because and I'd love to know more about your story too, but I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. I'd been studying it since about 2011, but I got into it in 2013. And so I've been through a lot of these cycles. I've been through so many different things, so many, pumps and dumps and, all the things. And so I became probably a little bit late, probably 2017, 2018 is when I became, more of a Bitcoin maximalist and, end the Fed and all the libertarian ideals. But I think that what I and a lot of the other, sort of Bitcoin personal finance people are is we're we're able to, hold two ideas in our head at the same time. Yes, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Yes, I believe that the vast majority of your Bitcoin should be held in cold storage. You need to understand self-custody. The whole point of Bitcoin is owning your wealth. So if all of your Bitcoin is in, IBIT or FBTC or any of these instruments, you don't hold the keys, so it's not really your Bitcoin. So I will shout that from the rooftops till the cows come home. However, I also recognize that we all live in a fiat world, so I have to pay my bills in fiat. And yes, I could be a maximalist and hold all of my wealth in Bitcoin and sell some of my Bitcoin every month to pay my bills. I don't want to do that. That's an odious, tax calculation burden. And plus, I don't want to sell my Bitcoin because, I want it. I want to have it for that appreciation. Now, what's great is that there are products like Stretch that, can basically replace and are way better than a money market account. Money market account, which is really what Michael Saylor is going after, is that market. A money market account basically just gives 4% as opposed to 11.5%. So yeah, I think that what I and I think Rajat Soni and Brian Harrington and a few other guys that are in the Bitcoin space, we're trying to really reframe the conversation. Not that we're non-Bitcoin maximalists any more than we ever have been. We just recognize, like I showed you guys a little while ago in the adoption curve, we're in the early majority. The early majority is like, dude, I don't care about your software. I don't care about your libertarian values. I just give me the exposure to the asset because the number go up, And so I think it's just a little bit more of a nuanced conversation. And I'm going to be doing more content around that. So what other questions do you guys have? I want to watch a few more of this, but what other questions do you guys have about Stretch? What other questions do you have, just about anything that you're sort of working through, anything that I can sort of help you navigate? And we're going to, like I said, we're going to be doing this every week, and I'm going to be starting my private community to have even more exposure and access pretty soon.
And so he owed effectively $100,000 on a $50,000 car because assets depreciate like crazy. And he didn't want to put much money down. And so he just wanted to have a newer car. And that's a hard thing to do because effectively, if you're trading a $50,000 car for a $150,000 car, you can adjust the numbers up. So you get $100 for your trade and you pay $200 for the new car. And
so people actually think like this. I mean, isn't it astounding? It's just astounding.
Still paying the same $100,000 delta. The bank doesn't know that the numbers were different, but that's too much to hide. Like hiding 20,000, maybe 30,000, maybe hiding 50 grand takes some doing. And we tried so many deals, and I ended up selling him an Aston Martin Virage when we got an incentive on those back in 2012. And he was the happiest guy in the world. Now he owed at that point at least 100 more than that car was going to be worth immediately, but he loved it, and that was his thing, and he was going to probably pay it for 5, 6, 7 years, and he was fine with it.
So when you see people driving like really expensive exotic cars, what percentage of those people have them financed and can barely afford them?
It's going to vary a little bit by market and by demographic, but I would say 75% are financed. Certainly in my sales experience, 75%.
When you say 75 financed, is that because that's the smart move to make because they got a low interest rate that makes more sense to arbitrage the money, or is that because they just can't afford it?
No, because they cannot afford it.
So a lot of people think that if you drive a supercar, generally speaking, you're kind of loaded. Like I feel like especially a lot of, I could be wrong here, but like girls, they'll see a guy driving a nice car, they're like, ooh, he's got money. But you'd say that's generally not the greatest.
If you're driving a supercar that's less than 5 years old, you should not assume that person has a lot of money.
Really?
Yeah. If they're driving
Shocking,
an
right?
iconic vintage or significant car, something that's 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, for sure, there's a really good chance because those are harder to finance. But if they've got a brand new Huracan, no.
Interesting.
Didn't the Dave Ramsey millionaire study show that most millionaires drive Toyotas?
Yeah, Toyotas, Hondas, and the F-150 pickup trucks.
Yeah, but that data is massively skewed because most millionaires are retired.
Fair.
So most millionaires are 60 plus years old. If
That
you
is a
ask
great
what
point, yeah.
millionaires under the age of 40 drive, it would be BMWs, Mercedes, Audis. I mean,
those three brands.
Believe it or not, the Tesla Model Y and Model 3 were the most common in Reddit fat fire. But that skews to a lot of California, Vancouver.
Yeah,
right.
But yeah, that was the most common.
Yeah, there's some great questions coming here. Jennifer asks, how do you make decisions with confidence of how much Stretch to buy versus Bitcoin versus having accessible savings in cash versus adding to your Roth IRA? Yeah, so these are all things that, have to be worked through on a very individual level, which I think, I'm not trying to push you to do this, but I think you would be a great candidate for one of those 30-minute calls. Because if I know what your income is, what your expenses are, what your overall net worth is, and what your FIRE number is, and then have a pretty good, if you can show up to that call with a pretty good idea of what the inventory of your asset pile is, then we can start to say, okay, yeah, this is you're obviously still in the growth phase, or maybe you're getting ready to cross over into income generation. It's really all about, there's just more context that I would need to be, to be able to help you, make those decisions about where you are, in your journey right now. But those are great questions, and these are the kinds of questions that we're trying to address, on the channel. So that's it. That's great. How do you make decisions with confidence about how much stretch? So once you've eliminated all your consumer debt, you're on your way to investing and all that. So I think the 4 levels of liquidity, I would go watch that video, download my buy, borrow, die guide strategy, and really start saying, okay, level 1, I need 6 to 12 months of cash for regular expenses. Now, again, Bitcoiners hate cash. I get it. That's part of the reason Stretch is a really potentially great fit for that, because it's a cash equivalent. Layer 2 is, okay, how much do I need based on, my overall asset pile and what my current needs are? How much do I need in, level 2? And then level 3 and level 4 are sort of, they in some ways kind of take care of themselves, because level 4 is like, it's real estate. That's the most, illiquid of all of your assets likely. So I would say the 4 levels of liquidity are going to give you a really good idea of, okay, cool, this is exactly what I need to do, and, all of that. So does that answer your question, Jennifer? I hope so. It's, like I said, it's difficult in this sort of context to, go super deep with that, but, and especially without, any kind of, more context. But I think that really studying the 4 levels of liquidity is going to help you feel more comfortable about how and where you should be allocating stuff. James Artizone, I've accumulated 4 Bitcoin year to date, but at a cost of a nice chunk of low interest debt from a 0% credit card and a HELOC loan to buy the BTC. Then BTC dumped before I could pay them off, and now all are coming due. Yeah, so I would say that you're probably, in the position of being over allocated, which, we've talked about earlier. I would go back and watch the part where I walk through the 4 layers of liquidity. This is the biggest mistake that I see Bitcoiners make, is they over allocate into Bitcoin at the expense of not having those 4 layers of liquidity. If you don't have the 4 layers of liquidity and you're over allocated, when Bitcoin dumps 40%, 50%, I've been through 85% drawdowns, then you are left exposed, and you don't want to do that. So I would say, yeah, James, I would recommend, you're saying you're debating a Bitcoin loan to help pay off some of the debt until Bitcoin appreciates. You could be making another very bad decision if you do that. I would not recommend that you do that. That is something that I talk through with clients on these 30-minute calls, again, to get that, I don't mean to sound like I'm like overselling the 30-minute calls, but a lot of you guys, like, that would clear up a whole bunch of questions that you have. My calls are very reasonable. Right now they're $55. I'm actually raising the price April 1st. So you want to go ahead and book that before I raise the price on April 1st. And then, so I would just be very careful, James. Like, it sounds to me like, there's some wobbliness in your plan. And so I think, buttressing those 4 levels of liquidity is going to be huge for you. Florida Swamp Monkey says, does Stretch automatically dividend into more Stretch? Yeah, it really depends on how you set it up. So, like, for example, in our Fidelity account, when you set it up in your brokerage or whatever account you're setting it up in, you can receive the dividends as cash, or you can have the dividends reinvested. So, yeah, so that's an individual thing that you'd have to set up in your brokerage account. Let's see. It does this. Just 3 months. I'm not really sure. Yeah, $200 a month. Thank you. Your video that my husband got me to watch last week caused me to buy my first STRC share. We're evaluating our situation and liquidity for a future conversation. That's perfect. Yeah. And by the way, if you don't need a 30-minute call, then if you're getting enough value and enough guidance out of my free content, that means the world to me. I really appreciate it. If you feel like you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. There are other ways. But my overarching thing with this platform is to help millennials and Gen X navigate these very confusing waters of, like Christopher Nelson talks about, if your net worth is between 1 million and 30 million, there's a financial services desert. Like, there's nobody here to serve us, right? Because If you're under $1 million, you just follow the Dave Ramsey and FIRE stuff, because you got to get, that's really kind of one of the hurdles that you need to reach in order to really truly think about financial independence, in my opinion. And then, you don't have access to a family office unless you're worth about $100 million. And then there are shared services between 30 million and 100 million. And so, those of us that are between 1 million and 30 million, it's kind of like, all right, there's nobody out here talking to us. If you go to a Fidelity or a traditional, TradFi financial advisor, they're just they have templates. They don't have time to give you the customized advice and insights and analysis of your portfolio and your future needs to be able to do anything about that. Let's see. Joshua Tenafrencia says, no. Your knowledge is valuable. Thank you. I appreciate that. We still live in a world where we need cash. We still have to use dollars. Absolutely. That's a big part of, my sort of lane of departure from the classic sort of Bitcoin maximalist, where you're all in on Bitcoin. It's all in self-custody, and you just, you're just white knuckling it until the day that Bitcoin is the world reserve currency. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. First of all. Second of all, it's like, Angelina says, like, we live in a world where we need cash. Like we still live in a fiat world. And so why not bifurcate your stack out into some things that you can actually, use. So if you can't live off $200 a week, you're mostly just being greedy. I'm sorry. I don't really understand that comment. James says, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. And please hear what I'm saying. Like, I know sometimes, I guess, because I get pretty passionate about these things, that it may come off like I'm being kind of like harsh or judgy or some of that stuff. That's not. I've seen, over my 17 plus years as a financial coach, I've seen a lot of people make a lot of completely avoidable mistakes. And so I just want to help you guys do that. On Robinhood, let's say Bitcoin to the moon. Yeah. Pueblo Roku says, any fins of the dumb money movie here? Oh, fans of the dumb money movie. Not to get off track. Dumb money. I actually haven't seen that. So that's a really good, I'll have to research that. All right, guys, I've gone a little bit over time. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, I get, I send out notifications like the day or two before we do these. So if you want to be notified, if you want, the special sort of inside baseball of what we're doing. Also, that link to my card site, basically is if you're looking at booking a 30-minute call, which I think that a lot of my audience the feedback that I get, it's like, hey, that was money that was very well spent. I just got a few points of clarity on some things that I just wasn't sure about. That is a great way to do that. And then if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, where'd you go? I'll just have to pull that from earlier in the. But any additional questions, comments, or smart remarks? Let's see. That's buy, borrow, die. Yeah. So if you want to subscribe to the newsletter so that you can, be in the know, and there's going to be lots of pretty cool stuff that we're going to be doing. I'm in the design phase of the community, because I want to make sure, number one, that it's really, really super helpful and value, and number two, that I'm doing it in a way that doesn't burn me out, because I've done that before with my prior brand. Florida Swamp Monkey says, I'll be Dogecoin because it doesn't stop at 21 million. It's ultimately infinite. All right. Well, great content. Thank you. We'll look up the booking call next. Yeah. I just put the link below. Two comments. That's the card.co site if you want to book. Yeah, well, great. So great to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I love doing this every week. Just a chance to connect with you guys. You guys are asking great questions. I have a video coming out tomorrow. What's my video about? 0.1 Bitcoin. Would you like some bacon and eggs? I would love some bacon and eggs. Man, if you guys want to bring me bacon and eggs, I'll take it all day long. Hey, stay frosty out there, my friends. Thanks so much for showing up. I appreciate you guys. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And just interact. Leave questions for me. I'm so blessed to be able to do this and to help you guys and to interact with you guys. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I'll see you soon.